How's it going, YouTube? It's Joeyboy here, and we are doing a video that has been requested a couple times in the comments. We're going to be doing a team building guide video. I'd had a couple people comment say if I would have a little video talking about how I build teams, how I think it's best to build teams, stuff like that. So I thought, why not? One of the most fun things I have about Pokemon is building teams. It is where I get most of the pleasure out of playing Pokemon. I enjoy playing the actual battles, but I like trying to build the best teams possible, or the coolest teams, a team with like a really underrated threat, stuff like that. As you can see from this long list, I like to build teams, and some of them I just test out, and maybe they'll end up being crap, which can definitely happen. And don't let yourself get discouraged from that, I guess, is tip number one. It's okay to spend a little bit of time building a team, and then when you start testing out, you start getting 6-0'd by really common stuff. Just means you've had some kind of slip up during the team building phase where you didn't spend enough time looking at threats. So I guess with that said, let's go ahead and very quickly look at the most common good, quote-unquote good team I've made. And it was this one. It was the one I used in that last video. And it's an offensive sand team. Well, offensive bouncy, like I said last time, because Ferrothorn and Hippowdon are pretty defensive. And I'm actually going to take you guys through how I built that team. So here we go. You have no Pokemon. The first thing you want to do is kind of have an idea before you start building your team. Kind of a theme, I guess it would be. And for that particular team, I had a theme in mind, and that was Landorus and Keldeo. As I spent a lot of time talking about last time, Landorus is getting SAtk tested, and I wanted to try and build a team that would really play to Landorus's strengths. And those strengths tend to come with being paired with certain Pokemon. And as many of you know, the pair of Pokemon I'm talking about is Keldeo and Tyranitar. So this is where I kind of started with. There had been a lot of talk in the SAtk thread on Smogon about the super overpoweredness of this core. And of course that strength comes from the fact that Tyranitar, utilizing Choice Band along with Pursuit, can trap a lot of the Pokemon that trouble these two, such as Celebi was the big one, and the Latias and Latios were the next two. And of course Tyranitar can also use stuff like Crunch if it's speedy enough to take out Jellicents for Keldeo if they try and stay into Will-O-Wisp, which they tend to. So this is kind of where I started. I did start with a choice-banded Terrakion, and I was just using something like, let's just use this, because as you saw in the final version of my team, Tyranitar gets the axe. So I was using a speedy Tyranitar choice band. It was, I can't say for sure I was running 252 speed EVs, but I was definitely running a lot of speed to try and catch Jellicents with the Crunch before they Will-O-Wisped. Now, onto these guys. I am a strong believer in that Choice Scarfed Keldeo is the best revenge killer in the OU minigame, and can clean up so many teams once their one big water resistance is out of the way. So that was my next addition, and I just used something pretty standard, some people will swear by, only one water move, and then, HP Ghost and Icy Wind, but I've had too many things like Garchomp's Living Icy Wind to revenge kill me. So, and I also like, with this, I don't have to compromise between either having accuracy or having the high power. I have both and can switch off. And the Landorus part of the core was definitely going to be sheer force. And with Tyranitar removing, things like Celebi, I thought about using Rock Polish. But then, of course, most Celebi now are running enough speed to outspeed Tyranitar, plus Baton Pass, which allows it not to be trapped. And, I already had a lot of speed in Choice Scarf Keldeo, so I ended up going for the U-Turn Sheer Force Landorus set. The one that was having a lot of controversy revolved around it about how it was, uncounterable, and how, U-Turn hits those Celebes for super effective damage. So that's what I thought, this way these three really complement each other really well. Landorus just U-turns on Celebes, Tyranitar can break Latios and Latios for sure, and then Keldeo can clean up. So this is what I started with. It's a pretty common core, especially in today's metagame. And this is where I went through a bunch of different changes. Once you have your core in team building, you want to try and complement it while also making sure you're covering certain threats. So the first thing I see here is these two are weak to water, and Choice Scarf Keldeo is not exactly bulky. That means stuff like Specs Keldeo in the rain would be a huge problem for these three. So I went with the pretty standard Keldeo counter Celebi, and I went for a special defensive set, and I decided I would use the Nasty Pass version seen in teams like Kidogo's Rain offensive team. So if any of you don't know it, it's Nasty Plot, Psychic, Baton Pass, and Recover. And the idea of this is that it has a lot of the things that Celebi needs to be a special defensive wall. It has Baton Pass, Get Out Tyranitar, Recover, and Nasty Plot allows it to pass boosts to these two. So next Pokemon, I wanted Rocks, and this was a bit of a throwaway almost. It was Focus Sash Terrakion. I think it's my favorite hazard lead for just pure getting rocks up early game, which is pretty key for an offensive team like mine. So with that, I was looking at my team and still pretty weak to water, and it was an offensive team, and I kind of like to have two checks to Keldeo, because they tend to overlap with other threats. They also tend to check Landorus, so I decided to just throw in a Choice Spect Latios just to smash things. So with this, you have your team of 6, and it was a pretty good team. I started using it, and I had some success, but it never really took off, and I found a lot of that came from Tyranitar. I just do not really like Tyranitar that much in this metagame, even though it is held up high for being able to have such bulk, and for, I would probably agree, the best weather starter objectively. but there's so many fighting type Pokemon out, like Keldeo and Terrakion, and it felt like it was definitely the least important member of the team in 9 matches out of 10. Honestly, that many matches, I just felt I was either sacking it or just using it to pursuit one mon, and that was it. And sometimes that worked, but I started to think there must be a better way. So I wanted to keep this Pursuit Keldeo Landorus core intact. So I started to think of other Pokemon who can Pursuit well in the metagame. You know, and Scizor, of course, was the first one that jumped to mind. But I decided to go another route. And I thought, another Pokemon that uses Pursuit? Well, what about Stoutland, the dog Pokemon? And it can be choice banded, and with Sand Rush it's really fast, so it can catch, you know, it can still Pursuit Trap weakened Latios and Latias and just checkmate them, because it outspeeds, and it traps them with Pursuit. It outspeeds Syllabies, which was a big problem I was having even with my speedy Tyranitar. Syllabies could just very easily baton pass out, and as long as they were careful around the Landorus, I couldn't break them for Keldeo to sweep. So I thought, why not try Stoutland? So I went for the very standard choice banded Stoutland with Pursuit, Return, Wild Charge, and Superpower. That was another problem I was having with the team. Dragon Dance Gyarados, however you want to say it, could set up on, you know, it could set up on Landorus, it could set up on choice locked Keldeo. You know, it couldn't set up on Latios, but after a Dragon Dance, Latios couldn't outspeed. It hit Tyranitar for super effective, so it was a huge threat. And with Sand Rush Wild Charge, I could revenge it. Now, of course, we got rid of Tyranitar, so I thought, let's try Hippowdon. Because, in my opinion, if you want sand, if sand is really, you know, for a lot of people, sand is the neutral weather, along with hail. You use it to counter the other weathers. But if you want your sand for benefits, I think Hippowdon just beats out Tyranitar in almost every situation, just because it has reliable recovery, and checks a lot of physically defensive Pokemon. So we're going to use the standard Hippowdon Stealth Rock set, with Slack Off and Whirlwind, and we went with defensive. And so I started using this team, and it was good. I enjoyed it more than the Tyranitar Terrakion version, but it still wasn't quite there yet. And I decided I wanted more passive damage. You know, I have these 2 awesome late game sweepers in Choice Scarf Keldeo and Choice Band Stoutland. If I can rack up hazard damage along with sand, they'll have a really easy time just picking apart teams at the end of the games. You know, along with U-Turn Landorus, who can break Pokemon, I thought that would work out really well. So I decided to look at Pokemon who have spikes. You know, I was looking at Fortress and Ferrothorn, you know, the 2 big ones. Skarmory I kind of decided not to use because I have physically defensive Hippo. And since I would be replacing one of these 2, I would be losing a water resistance. So I said Ferrothorn. Yes. Yes. Ferrothorn is so annoying with spikes. And I used my all-time favorite Ferrothorn set with Spikes, Leech Seed, Protect, and the Power Whip. I go back and forth between Power Whip and Gyro Ball. But I thought Power Whip would be better. You know, I can hit Jellicent much harder with it. and potentially, you know, get that extra damage I need to break it for Keldeo to start spamming surfs. So I went for, you know, I'm just going to throw out a random spread here. I'm pretty sure this is fairly standard. And then, careful. And, oh, I mean, such a hugely annoying set. You know, a rain team better hope they have a strong fighting type, or Ferrothorn just ravages them with Leech Seed and Protect while setting up his own spikes. So with, at this point, I've got spikes and I've got Stealth Rock. So I am a huge defender of, if you have spikes and Stealth Rocks, it's really good to have a spin blocker. And my team's pretty offensive, so I thought it's gotta be the one and only Gengar. And Gengar has a set that takes huge advantage of a lot of entry hazards being down. It was introduced in 4th gen, and it is sub-disable. Because so many people, so many different Pokemon really just have that one move that really damages Gengar. And so once you disable it, they have to switch, and that racks up even more damage. So this is the outcome of the team. It's that same team you saw just, you know, a couple minutes ago, and that's how I built it. I built it around mainly the Landorus Keldeo Pursuit core. But, of course, I went with a different approach. Instead of using the standard Tyranitar with Choice Band to Pursuit, I went with Stoutland. And then, of course, so there you go. That's the 3-part theme, the theme core of the team. And then I'd use the last 3 to, you know, cover weaknesses, you know, cover water weaknesses with Ferrothorn, and got the sand and the spin blocker. But of course, no team is perfect. This team has problems with stuff like Breloom. Gengar is our best check to it, but it can take a lot of damage from Bullet Seed, especially with multi-hits. Breloom revenges Stoutland with Mach Punch. Ferrothorn can't do anything to it except a weak resisted Power Whip, or try and set up spikes while he sets up. Landorus can revenge with HP Ice, but a +2 Mach Punch will be destroying it if I've let it get too much passive damage up. Keldeo can again revenge if it's not set up, but with that Spore and Sword Stance and Priority, Breloom is a huge threat to this team. So that's another thing to always keep in mind while you're team building. A lot of the time you'll come to the end of team building and you'll still see these big threats, and you want to keep working it, and that's great. But you also have to remember, you always want to do risk versus reward. You know, Breloom is a big threat to this team, but changing the team too much starts to reveal other weaknesses. So it's a give and take. More often than not, when you find a weakness and fix a weakness, unless you had a really good switch when you were tweaking your team around, you're almost always going to have a weakness, especially in a metagame like Black and White 2 OU, where there are so many hugely threatening teams. You know, here's another threat for you right now, Giga Drain Volcarona. If they have a Sun team with something like Xatu, and I'm not able to get Stealth Rocks up before too long, Giga Drain Volcarona can do a lot of damage, especially in the Sun, where Keldeo might not be able to revenge it. So stuff like that. And you have to know that while you'll definitely have weaknesses, a well-built team should have a way past them. So, you know, like I was saying before, Breloom is a huge threat, but I only rarely get swept by it. Volcarona can be a big threat, but with Magic Bounce Sun teams, you know, I just have to play really really aggressively with Stoutland's Pursuit. Try and double in Stoutland when they bring in Espeon or Xatu and try and Pursuit Trap it. Because then I can get my hazards up and I will more than likely beat those Sun teams. So there you go, that's how I built that team. And I guess I'll just show you guys a couple other things I was working on. Another team, here you go, another team I was using in one of my videos is just, this is my, I just like to call it an easy ladder team. This was the team I used towards the end of my suspect requirements because it plays really consistently, which is something you need to have on the ladder. That's definitely another tip I would have. If any of you guys play tournaments, you know, on Smogon, which I myself am a fan of, know that tournament teams and ladder teams tend to be pretty different. You can definitely have a team that will perform well on both, but often I won't ladder, at least not in the beginning, with a team I would use in tournaments. This is a team here, for example. I would almost never bring this team into a tournament match. Just because this team kind of dwells on, I guess it's less experienced players. You know, for example, I've got Focus Sash on 3 Pokemon and Multiscale on another one. Also on ladder, you'll see here I've got Surf on this Cloyster. On ladder, I will almost always go with consistency over power. Just because, again, with ladder games, especially if you're trying to get high up on the ladder, you're going to be playing, you know, 50, 60 games. And if you have a team that, you know, has Focus Blast on 3 of your 6 Pokemon, you're going to lose to hacks a lot. And so that's just another thing to take into account when building teams. Know what you're building them for, I suppose, is what I'm trying to get across. Just know how you're going to be using them. So I guess to just go into this team a little bit more, this team I really wanted to highlight Anal Starmie, or Analytic Starmie, as its full name. And what Analytic does is you do 1.3 times the damage if you're the last to move in a turn. And so you might be thinking, you know, Joeyboy, that's not very useful. Starmie's really fast, you're so rarely going to be moving second. But the thing with this is, it works on the Switch. So why Analytic Starmie is so good is because it can 2-hit KO Jellicent on the Switch, which you would be surprised how especially defensive Jellicent is. So I wanted to use this Starmie because it's the ultimate spinner, at least at the moment. Second only to Excadrill, in my opinion, as far as offensive spinners go, because it can break Jellicent, and you know, Gengar obviously can't switch in. So it gets those spins off more often than not, and that allows me to abuse, you know, Focus Sash, on Terrakion, Focus Sash on Cloyster, which is just huge late game. Focus Sash on Breloom, even though it tends to be my lead. You know, it allows me to keep Dragonite's Multiscale intact. All that stems from this. So while my other team was kind of built around the 3 Pokemon core of Keldeo, Landorus, Pursuitmon, this team was built around abusing the spinning prowess of Analytic Starmie. And I just built the team around that support. You know, Dragonite loves Rapid Spin support, getting those rocks off. Cloyster, can't tell you how many times I've won a game by rapid spinning late game, just sacking Starmie to get all the hazards away, and then setting up a Shell Smash with Cloyster and just sweeping teams. And then of course I just gave the team a little bit of glue. I was lacking Steel type, so I went with Choice Scarf Jirachi. That's I guess a tip to leave you guys with, I suppose, always want to steal. 9 times out of 10, you want to steal type Pokemon. You know, I can tell you, I think I have one team of mine that works at least kind of consistently without steal, and that's this double trap sun team. And it still gets torn apart. You know, if I come across a dragon spam team, I lose a lot of the time. You know, I have to play Volcarona really well usually to win. So yeah, I suppose we're gonna cut it there. Just a quick little team guide. You know, maybe I think I would like to do these, you know, not super often, but every now and then, if I'm building a team, to just maybe build it, you know, on camera so you guys can see how I would do it. You can see there the team I click there. This is just something where I can look at sets, you know, check what Pokemon hit what speeds tiers and stuff. So yeah, what do you guys think? How do you guys build teams? Do you build around certain Pokemon? Do you build around cores? Do you build around a theme? And what are your most successful teams? I'll say most of my successful teams tend to be weather, because this Black and White OU and weather rules the metagame. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next time.